Prologue, The Legend of the Moonlight. In the quaint village of Lysandra, nestled between the whispering forests and the serene hills, there was a legend as old as the stones that paved its narrow paths. It was said that under the full moon, the Moonlight Goddess would descend to mingle among the mortals, her ethereal glow casting an enchanting silver hue over the land. Every child in Lysandra grew up knowing her tale, how she brought lovers together with her radiant beams, and how her benevolent gaze healed the ailing hearts of those she favored. It was a story of beauty and mystery, woven into the fabric of the village like the threads of the moon's own light. Sophie, a young writer from the bustling city, found herself captivated by the legend when she first stumbled upon it in an ancient, dusty book in her grandmother's attic. The book was leather-bound and fragile, its pages yellowed with age, but the story it told was timeless. Sophie's grandmother had often spoken of Lysandra in her stories, her voice tinged with a nostalgia that seemed to transcend mere memory. With nothing but a tattered map and a heart full of curiosity, Sophie decided to return to her roots, to Lysandra, where her grandmother had spent her youthful summers, and where the legend of the Moonlight Goddess still breathed life into the night air. As she packed her bags, Sophie felt a thrill of anticipation. She was not just going to visit her ancestral home, she was embarking on a quest to uncover the truths hidden within an old family tale, and perhaps, to witness the moonlight's magic herself. Little did she know, the village and its celestial mysteries were eagerly awaiting her arrival, ready to unveil secrets that had been whispered under the moon for centuries. As the wheels of her train clattered along the tracks, carrying her closer to Lysandra, the moon began its ascent in the sky, as if to light her way to the unfolding story. Chapter 1, Return to Home. The train rolled gently through the countryside, slicing through the fog of early morning. Sophie peered out of the window, her eyes tracing the blur of green and gold that was the landscape at sunrise. The world outside seemed to awaken with her anticipation, each mile bringing her closer to Lysandra, and to the secrets she hoped to uncover. She had left behind the cacophony of the city, its relentless pace and towering silhouettes, a stark contrast to the pastoral serenity that welcomed her now. The train whistle blew a melancholy tune, echoing through the hills as if announcing her return. Lysandra was the place her grandmother had painted in countless stories, a place stitched with the threads of many summers and secrets, wrapped in the warm glow of nostalgia and moonlit tales. As the train pulled into the small station, Sophie stepped onto the platform, her boots clicking softly against the old, worn wood. The air was crisp, laced with the scent of pine and the distant aroma of wood smoke. The village lay a short walk from the station, and as she made her way down the winding path, her suitcase in hand, she could feel the weight of generations that had walked this road before her. The village of Lysandra seemed untouched by time. Stone cottages with thatched roofs dotted the landscape, their gardens bursting with the last of summer's bloom. The central square was quiet, with an old fountain at its heart, depicting the Moonlight Goddess, her face serene and eyes closed, as if in perpetual contemplation of the skies. Sophie paused before the statue, taking in the exquisite craftsmanship. The goddess's arms were spread wide, embracing the village in an eternal guardian's pose. Locals passed by with nods and curious glances towards her, their faces marked with the rugged kindness that rural life often breeds. An elderly man, his back curved like the bough of an old tree, stopped beside her. "You must be one of the Lowell's kin," he said, his voice as rough as the gravel underfoot. "Haven't seen your folk around since Mabel passed on." "Yes, I'm Sophie. Mabel was my grandmother," she replied, feeling a connection to these people and this place through the bloodline and tales she had inherited. "Ah, Mabel's girl," the man smiled, revealing a set of uneven teeth. "She loved the moon, your grandmother did. Said it watched over her, kept her safe through many a lonely night. You have her eyes, you know, the same spark. Come to seek the moon's blessing, have you?" Sophie smiled, a mix of surprise and delight at the man's words. "Perhaps I have," she answered, intrigued by how deeply the legend was rooted in the lives of the villagers. With a friendly nod, the old man continued on his way, leaving Sophie to her thoughts. She turned from the fountain and walked towards the cottage that was once her grandmother's, a quaint dwelling with ivy climbing its stone walls and windows that looked out over the valley. As she pushed open the gate, its hinges creaking in protest, Sophie felt a profound sense of coming home. She was ready to delve into the mysteries of the past, guided by the moonlight that had once guided her grandmother. Here, in Lysandra, beneath the ever-watchful eye of the Moonlight Goddess, her journey was just beginning. Chapter 2, The Ancient Village. The morning after her arrival in Lysandra, Sophie set out to explore the village with a fresh sense of purpose. The air was cool and carried a faint mist that clung to the fields, shrouding the landscape in a gentle mystery. As she walked the cobblestone streets, the village slowly came to life, shutters were thrown open, and the aroma of fresh bread wafted from the small bakery near the square. Sophie was drawn to the details that seemed to hold the essence of the village's age and character. The walls of the buildings were thick and sturdy, built to last through centuries, their surfaces a tapestry of lichen and moss that told stories of time's passage. The wood of the doors was weathered but solid, each carved with intricate patterns and symbols that hinted at Lysandra's deep-rooted traditions and beliefs. Her exploration led her to the local history museum, a modest building situated at the edge of the village square. The museum was housed in what had once been the village school, its small classrooms now filled with relics of Lysandra's past. The curator, a middle-aged woman named Mrs. Elcott, greeted Sophie with a curious and welcoming smile. "You're new to Lysandra, aren't you?" "We don't get many visitors who come just for the history," Mrs. Elcott commented as she led Sophie through the first exhibit. "Yes, I'm exploring my grandmother's roots, and the legends of the Moonlight Goddess," Sophie explained, her eyes scanning the artifacts around her. Mrs. Elcott nodded enthusiastically. "Ah, the Moonlight Goddess. There's much lore here, woven into our village's history. Have you heard about the Moonlight Temple?" Sophie shook her head, her interest piqued. "No, I haven't." "What's that?" "It's an old place of worship, quite secluded and now mostly in ruins. Legend has it that it was a sacred site for moonlit rituals. People believed that the Moonlight Goddess would bless them if they worshipped her under the full moon there," Mrs. Elcott recounted, her voice lowering slightly as if she was sharing a secret. Intrigued by this new information, Sophie asked for directions to the temple. Mrs. Elcott sketched a map on a piece of paper, marking the path through the forest that bordered the village. "It's a bit of a hike, and not many go there anymore. But if you're interested in the legends, it's worth a visit." Thanking Mrs. Elcott, Sophie left the museum with the map clutched in her hand, her heart full of anticipation. The path to the Moonlight Temple wound through the thickening woods, the trees overhead forming a dense canopy that filtered the sunlight into a kaleidoscope of greens. As she walked, the sounds of the village faded away, replaced by the rustle of leaves and the distant call of a woodpecker. The forest seemed to embrace her, its ancient trees standing as silent sentinels. Sophie felt a deepening connection to the land and its history, her steps guided by the promise of uncovering the layers of lore that had brought her here. Finally, the forest opened up to reveal the ruins of the Moonlight Temple. The stone structure was partially collapsed, its once proud pillars now broken and scattered. But there was a peace to the place, a sacred stillness that spoke of centuries of solitude. The air around the temple seemed to shimmer slightly, as if touched by the lingering magic of countless moonlit nights. Sophie approached the ruins with reverence, aware that she was stepping into a chapter of history left untouched by time. Here, among the stones that had once echoed with the prayers of the faithful, she hoped to find the connection between her grandmother's tales and the spiritual heritage of Lysandra. As she explored the ruins, the legend of the Moonlight Goddess felt closer than ever, almost tangible in the quiet whisper of the wind through the leaves. Chapter 3: The Hidden Letter. After her visit to the Moonlight Temple, Sophie returned to her grandmother's cottage with a deepened sense of mystery and a resolve to dig deeper into her family's past. As evening approached, the sky turned a soft shade of twilight, and the air cooled, hinting at the night's approach. Sophie decided it was the perfect time to explore the attic, a space filled with old chests and dusty shelves that promised secrets of its own. Climbing the narrow, creaking stairs to the attic, Sophie felt as though she were stepping into a forgotten world. The room was dimly lit by the dying light that filtered through a small, round window. Cobwebs hung from the wooden beams, and the air was thick with the musty scent of old books and fabric. Sophie's heart raced with anticipation. This was the place her grandmother had stored not just belongings, but memories. She began to sift through the boxes and trunks, uncovering layers of family history, photographs, journals, and trinkets that had been tucked away for decades. Her fingers brushed against smooth leather, and she pulled out a small, intricately carved box. It was locked, but worn by time, and with a gentle tug, the lock gave way. Inside the box was a stack of letters, bound by a faded ribbon. The top envelope bore her grandmother's elegant script, addressed simply to "My dearest." Sophie's hands trembled as she unfolded the paper, feeling the weight of the words that had been sealed away so long. The letter was dated nearly 50 years ago, and began with a tenderness that immediately drew Sophie in. Her grandmother wrote of her deep love for Lysandra, for its beauty under the moonlight, and for someone named Jonathan. As Sophie read on, the narrative unveiled a poignant story of young love, full of hope and promises. Yet, interspersed within the affectionate words were hints of a secret, something important that her grandmother had hidden from everyone but Jonathan. The final part of the letter caught Sophie's attention most sharply. "My love, I have left something very special for you at our place, beneath the old oak where we first met under the full moon. It is my hope that one day, it can be revealed to the world, a testament to our love and the magic of this village." Sophie's mind raced. She knew the old oak tree. It still stood majestic in the village green, its branches sprawling like arms outstretched to the sky. What could her grandmother have hidden there? And why was it so important that it was meant to be shared with the world? With the letter in hand, Sophie knew where her next steps would lead. The moon was rising, casting its gentle light over Lysandra as if guiding her way. She grabbed a flashlight and headed toward the village green, driven by the need to uncover the hidden truths of her grandmother's past. As she reached the old oak, the moonlight filtered through the branches, casting shadows that danced on the ground. Sophie began to search around the tree, her hands brushing through the grass and over the roots. Finally, her fingers touched something hard and metallic hidden beneath the earth and leaves. Digging it out, she found an old metal box, rusted but still intact. Her heart pounding, Sophie opened the box under the moon's watchful eye, eager to reveal the secrets that had been buried for decades. Secrets that might illuminate the depth of the Moonlight Goddess's influence on her family and the entire village of Lysandra. Chapter 4: Meeting Under Moonlight. As Sophie lifted the lid of the rusted metal box, she discovered an array of old photographs and a smaller, leather-bound journal. The pictures showed her grandmother, young and radiant, often standing under the very oak tree where Sophie now sat. In several photos, she was with a tall, smiling man, presumably Jonathan, embraced by the silver glow of moonlight. The happiness in their eyes was unmistakable, as was the deep affection they seemed to share. With the box beside her, Sophie opened the journal. The entries were dated around the same time as the letters she found in the attic. Her grandmother's handwriting flowed across the pages, detailing daily life, the deep connection with Jonathan, and their shared enchantment with the Moonlight Goddess. The journal also mentioned several midnight meetings at this oak tree, where they felt closest to the celestial spirit they revered. Engrossed in the journal, Sophie didn't notice the approach of another until a gentle voice broke the silence of the night. "It's a beautiful night to be exploring the past, isn't it?" Startled, Sophie looked up to see a woman standing at the edge of the moonlight's reach. She was perhaps in her late 50s, her hair silver like the moonlight itself, and her eyes carried a warmth that immediately put Sophie at ease. "Yes, it is," Sophie replied, smiling tentatively. "I'm Sophie, Mabel's granddaughter. I thought you might be." "I'm Clara. Jonathan was my uncle." "I heard from the village that you've returned to Lysandra," Clara said, stepping into the light and sitting beside Sophie. Together, they went through the contents of the box. Clara shared stories of her uncle, giving life to the man in the photographs. "They loved each other deeply," Clara said, tracing her finger over a photo of Jonathan and Mabel laughing together. "But circumstances pulled them apart. He moved away for a job, and though they planned to reunite, life seemed to get in the way." "Why did my grandmother never mention him in her later years?" Sophie asked, the question lingering heavily in the air. Clara sighed, a note of sadness in her voice. "I think it was too painful for her to talk about what could have been. They made a pact, under this very tree, to part ways, hoping to live fuller lives apart than they could have together at the time." As the moon climbed higher, casting its silver net over the scene, Sophie felt a connection not just to her grandmother, but also to Clara and Jonathan, to their shared past tied deeply to this village. Clara suggested they walk back to the village together, offering to show Sophie some of the places mentioned in the journal. Walking under the gentle illumination of the moonlight, the stories from her grandmother's journal came alive. Each landmark they passed seemed to whisper fragments of forgotten conversations, laughter, and promises. The village, under the night sky, felt timeless, and Sophie knew she was walking through layers of memories, each step uncovering more about her roots and the mysterious allure of the Moonlight Goddess. As they neared Clara's home, she turned to Sophie with a smile. "You know, they believed the Moonlight Goddess watched over them. Maybe she's watching over you now, guiding you to find these stories." Sophie nodded, feeling the truth in Clara's words. The mysteries of the Moonlight Goddess and her grandmother's life were slowly unraveling, and with each revelation, Sophie felt more connected to this place, drawn in by the moonlit shadows of love and loss that had shaped her family's history. Chapter 5: Unraveling the Mystery. With the dawn bringing a new day to Lysandra, Sophie woke feeling more determined than ever to piece together the fragments of her grandmother's past. Her encounter with Clara had provided invaluable insights and deepened the connection she felt with both the village and her family's history. As she sat at the small wooden table in her grandmother's kitchen, Sophie spread out the photographs, the letters, and the journal, organizing them like pieces of a puzzle waiting to be solved. She began by rereading the journal entries, paying closer attention to any mention of specific locations or significant events that might lead her to understand the full story. One entry, in particular, caught her eye, an account of a midsummer festival where Mabel and Jonathan had made a significant decision regarding their future. The festival was an annual event in Lysandra, celebrating the peak of summer under the light of the full moon, a night where the influence of the Moonlight Goddess was believed to be at its strongest. Intrigued by this, Sophie decided to visit the village archives. The building was a small, stone structure near the town hall, its old wooden doors creaky with age. Inside, the air was cool and smelled of old paper and dust. Mr. Henley, the archivist, greeted her with a curious look over his round glasses. "Good morning. How can I help you today?" he asked, peering at the collection of papers Sophie had brought with her. "I'm looking into my grandmother, Mabel Lowell's history. I found references to the Midsummer Festival and some significant events in her life that might have been documented here," Sophie explained. Mr. Henley nodded, his interest piqued. Ah, the Midsummer Festival is a major part of our village's heritage. Let's see what we have. He led her through rows of filing cabinets and pulled out a drawer marked with the year Sophie was interested in. Together, they pored over the festival records, finding not only administrative details, but also personal accounts and photographs from the event. One document, in particular, stood out, a written agreement between Jonathan and Mabel, witnessed by several prominent villagers, pledging to part ways after the festival in hopes that each would find happiness apart from the other. Sophie felt a mix of sadness and resolve as she read the document. It was a tangible proof of the decision that had shaped her grandmother's life so profoundly. "Thank you, Mr. Henley. This has been incredibly helpful," Sophie said, her voice thick with emotion. Returning to the cottage, Sophie took a long walk through the village, tracing the paths that her grandmother and Jonathan might have walked together. She ended up at the oak tree once more, sitting beneath its spreading branches. As she sat, she thought about the nature of promises and the ways in which love and sacrifice intertwine. It was then that Sophie realized she hadn't fully explored the metal box. She rummaged through it once more and found a hidden compartment at the bottom. Inside was a small, hand-carved wooden amulet, shaped like the Moonlight Goddess. A note accompanied it, written in her grandmother's hand. "To whoever finds this, know that true love never dies. It lives on in the stories we tell and the memories we cherish. This amulet is a symbol of my heart, forever tied to Jonathan and to Lysandra. Keep it safe, and remember that the Moonlight Goddess watches over us all." Tears welled up in Sophie's eyes as she clutched the amulet. She had come to Lysandra seeking stories and had found so much more, a legacy of love and the enduring power of faith in the unseen. She knew then what she needed to do. With the festival approaching once again, it was time to honor her grandmother's memory and perhaps find a way to renew the old traditions under the watchful gaze of the Moonlight Goddess. Chapter 6, A Love from the Past. As the Midsummer Festival drew near, Sophie felt the pulse of the village quicken with excitement. The event promised not only a celebration of the season, but also an opportunity for her to honor the memories of Mabel and Jonathan. Determined to delve even deeper, Sophie spent the days leading up to the festival revisiting the places her grandmother had mentioned in her journals, each site steeped in memories and moonlit whispers. The day before the festival, Sophie decided to visit the local church, where an old priest, Father Michaels, kept records going back centuries. The church was a small, stone building with stained glass windows that threw patterns of light onto the flagstone floor. Father Michaels welcomed her with a gentle smile and led her to the dusty archives in the back. "There's something romantic about digging into the past, isn't there?" Father Michaels remarked as they walked among the towering shelves of books and scrolls. Sophie nodded, her mind filled with images of Mabel and Jonathan. "I'm hoping to learn more about their story, anything that could give me a clearer picture of their relationship." Father Michaels helped her search through marriage registries, baptismal records, and old bulletins. Though they found no new information on Jonathan and Mabel's relationship, the search wasn't in vain. Among the church's bulletins, Sophie discovered old writings about the beliefs and customs of Lysandra, including the profound impact the Moonlight Goddess had on its people. Equipped with this new knowledge, Sophie spent the evening at her grandmother's cottage, piecing together her presentation for the festival. She wanted to share not just the story of Mabel and Jonathan, but also the cultural heritage that framed their love. The day of the festival arrived, warm and clear. The villagers gathered in the town square, where booths of food, crafts, and displays of local history had been set up. Children ran with ribbons and laughter filled the air. Sophie set up her own booth, laying out the photographs, the letters, and the wooden amulet. She also prepared a board detailing the history of the Moonlight Goddess's influence on the village. As the moon began to rise, casting a soft glow over the festivities, Sophie stood up to speak. The crowd quieted, and she began to tell the story of a love from the past, a story of separation and memory, framed by the belief in the Moonlight Goddess. Mabel and Jonathan's story is not just a tale of romance, Sophie concluded, her voice strong with emotion. It's also a story about our village, about the beliefs that hold us together and the love that can transcend even separation. The villagers listened, moved by the depth of the connection that had reached from the past into their present. Many older residents nodded, remembering Mabel and even Jonathan, adding their own memories to the shared narrative. After her presentation, Sophie returned to her booth, where the wooden amulet lay under the moonlight. A young couple approached, their hands entwined. "We heard your story," the young woman said. "It's beautiful. How much for the amulet?" Sophie smiled, picking up the amulet. "This isn't for sale. But I'd like you to have it," she said, placing it in their hands. "Consider it a blessing from the past, for your future together." The couple was overjoyed, promising to cherish the gift. Watching them walk away, Sophie felt a warmth spread through her. The festival continued around her, alive with music and laughter, and as she looked up at the moon, she felt her grandmother's presence, as if Mabel, too, was smiling down upon Lysandra. With the past bridged to the present, and the legacy of the Moonlight Goddess renewed, Sophie knew that her journey had woven new threads into the fabric of her own life. Her heart was full, her spirit connected to the village and its celestial protector in ways she had never imagined. Chapter 7, The Perilous Truth. The Midsummer Festival had left the village of Lysandra abuzz with a renewed sense of community and heritage, but for Sophie, the event had sparked a deeper curiosity about the Moonlight Goddess and the secrets buried in her family's past. The young couple's acceptance of the amulet had been a touching moment, yet it reminded Sophie of the unresolved mysteries surrounding her grandmother's story and the reasons behind her and Jonathan's decision to part ways. In the days following the festival, Sophie spent her mornings at the village library, combing through local newspapers and historical records, trying to piece together what might have been considered dangerous or taboo about Mabel and Jonathan's relationship. It wasn't until she stumbled upon a series of old newspaper clippings about the village's stricter past under a conservative leadership that things began to take shape. The articles detailed a time when the village leaders had imposed harsh rules regarding relationships and interactions with outsiders. These rules were rooted in old superstitions and a fear of losing cultural purity, which had been aggressively enforced. Sophie's heart raced as she realized that Jonathan had been an outsider, not originally from Lysandra, and their relationship would have been seen not just as unconventional, but as a direct defiance of these norms. Determined to understand the full extent of the danger they faced, Sophie visited Clara again. She found her in the garden, pruning her rose bushes under the afternoon sun. "Clara, I found something in the village archives," Sophie began, showing her the newspaper clippings. "Did Jonathan ever mention these rules to you?" Clara took the papers, her brow furrowing as she read. "I remember him talking about some troubles, but he never went into details. He was a private person, especially about his time in Lysandra." Sophie sighed, frustration mingling with her concern. "I think Mabel and Jonathan were forced apart not just by circumstance, but by these rules. They must have known the risks." "That would explain a lot," Clara said, handing back the clippings. "It must have been hard for them, choosing between their love and their safety." With a new understanding of the risks her grandmother and Jonathan had faced, Sophie felt a profound respect and sorrow for their plight. It wasn't just social disapproval they had navigated, but real peril. Back at her grandmother's cottage, Sophie pulled out the journal and letters once more, seeking any reference to these struggles. Among the pages, she found a letter from Jonathan to Mabel that had slipped behind others, unseen until now. In it, Jonathan wrote about his departure. "My dearest Mabel, leaving you is the hardest decision I have ever made, but it is not safe for us here anymore. They have warned me against continuing our relationship, and I fear for your safety as much as for mine. I will always cherish the moments we shared under the watch of the Moonlight Goddess, and I hope one day, the world will be kinder to those who dare to love as we have." The letter was a poignant reminder of the sacrifices made in the name of love and the harsh realities of their time. Sophie felt a resolve settle within her. She needed to bring this part of the story to light, not just for her family, but for the village. It was important to remember not just the beauty of their love, but also the courage it took to love in the face of danger. As the sun set, casting long shadows over the cottage, Sophie sat at her desk and began to write. She wrote of love, of loss, of the courage of her grandmother and Jonathan, and of the Moonlight Goddess who had watched over them. This chapter of her book would honor their bravery and serve as a reminder of the importance of fighting for the right to love freely. It was a story of the past, deeply entwined with the present, and with the hope of a more accepting future. Chapter 8, The Oath Under Moonlight. The revelation of the hardships her grandmother and Jonathan faced compelled Sophie to seek a deeper understanding of their final moments together. Guided by Jonathan's heartfelt letter and the gravity of their circumstances, Sophie felt a burning need to revisit the place where it all culminated, the old oak tree where they had made their painful decision to part ways. It was late afternoon when Sophie made her way to the village green, the shadows growing longer with each step. The oak tree stood as a silent witness to decades of village history, its branches heavy with the weight of unspoken stories. As she approached, the light of the setting sun filtered through the leaves, casting patterns on the ground that seemed to dance with a life of their own. Underneath the oak, Sophie took out Jonathan's letter and read it again, her eyes lingering on each word. She could almost hear his voice, fraught with emotion, echoing through the years. The intensity of their promise to each other, made under this very tree, under the watchful eyes of the Moonlight Goddess, was palpable in the air around her. Driven by an impulse to connect with their past, Sophie decided to recreate their last night together. She planned to stay under the tree until the moon rose, hoping to capture some sense of what they had felt, to understand the depth of the oath they had taken. As dusk fell and the first stars began to twinkle in the sky, the village grew quiet, leaving Sophie alone with her thoughts. She lit a small lantern and placed it beside her, the soft glow comforting in the encroaching darkness. The air grew cooler, and the rustling leaves whispered secrets of the past. When the moon finally rose, bathing the oak in its silvery light, Sophie felt a profound connection to her grandmother and Jonathan. She closed her eyes and imagined them there, their young faces illuminated by the same moonlight, their hands clasped tightly as they made their solemn vow. They had promised to love each other from afar, to hold on to their memories until they could be together again, a promise sealed by the mystical energy of the Moonlight Goddess. It was an oath of love and sacrifice, made in the hope that one day, they could reunite without fear. Sophie opened her journal and began to write, not just recounting the story, but weaving her feelings into the narrative. She wrote about the strength it took to make such a sacrifice, the pain of parting, and the enduring nature of true love. She described the moonlight as a symbol of hope and protection, a celestial guardian for those forced to leave their hearts behind. As she wrote, Sophie felt as if she were bridging time, connecting the past and present through the power of story and the sacred ambience of this ancient meeting spot. Her words flowed freely, guided by the energy of the place and the clarity the moonlight brought. Finishing her writing for the night, Sophie packed up her belongings and touched the trunk of the old oak gently, whispering a thank you to her grandmother, to Jonathan, and to the Moonlight Goddess. She left the tree with a sense of peace, feeling that she had honored their memory and their oath in a way that they deserved. Sophie knew that this chapter of her book would resonate deeply with her readers, just as the story had resonated within her. The oath under moonlight was not just a tale of the past, it was a timeless echo of love and resilience that would inspire anyone who believed in the power of commitment, regardless of the trials they might face. Chapter 9, The Portal of Time. In the quiet hours of the morning following her night under the oak, Sophie found herself restless, her thoughts swirling with the emotions and revelations of her grandmother's story. She felt a profound connection across the generations, as if Mabel and Jonathan's spirits were urging her forward, guiding her to something yet undiscovered. Determined to delve deeper into the magical elements of the village's lore, Sophie decided to explore the legend of the Moonlight Temple once more, particularly the myth that it served as a portal through time during the rare alignment of a blue moon. She remembered Mrs. Elcott mentioning this aspect briefly, almost in passing, but now it seemed crucial to her understanding of the story. With the next blue moon only days away, Sophie felt a growing anticipation mixed with a dash of mysticism. She revisited the temple ruins, spending hours sketching the carvings and translating old scripts with the help of a local historian. The text spoke of a ritual performed under the blue moon, one that could open a door through time to allow true lovers a momentary reunion. Intrigued and inspired, Sophie resolved to participate in the upcoming ritual. She prepared by gathering the necessary artifacts described in the ancient texts, a silver pendant shaped like the moon, a chalice filled with water from the village spring, and an offering of wildflowers picked under the moonlight. Each item was charged with symbolic meaning, essential for the ritual's success. As the night of the blue moon approached, Sophie felt a mix of skepticism and wonder. The villagers, aware of her project, showed a keen interest, and some even offered to join her, eager to see if the legend held any truth. Together, they set up around the temple ruins, just as twilight faded into night. The air was charged with a palpable sense of expectation as Sophie arranged the artifacts according to the ancient instructions. She recited the old chants, her voice steady but filled with emotion. The silver pendant glowed faintly in the moonlight, and the water in the chalice rippled without wind. Around her, the villagers watched in silent awe, their skepticism waning under the undeniable atmosphere of enchantment. As the moon reached its zenith, a strange, serene stillness enveloped the temple. For a moment, Sophie thought she saw shadows moving just beyond the edge of the light, shapes that seemed both familiar and otherworldly. She continued her chant, her voice now a whisper, barely audible over the thumping of her heart. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the stillness broke. A gentle breeze swept through the temple, rustling the leaves and whispering through the grass. The pendant ceased its glowing, and the water stilled once again. While no portal had visibly opened, no dramatic shift in time occurred, the experience left everyone present feeling a profound sense of connection to the past. They shared stories of their ancestors, spoke of lost loves, and recounted old village legends that had been passed down through generations. Sophie, standing in the midst of it all, felt a deep contentment. She may not have witnessed a literal door through time, but she had opened a figurative one, bridging her present with the past of her grandmother and the entire village. She had revived old traditions, brought the community together, and enriched the living tapestry of Lysandra's history. As she gathered her things and prepared to leave the temple, Sophie knew that this chapter of her book would not just tell a story of mystical rituals, it would speak to the power of heritage and belief in connecting us across time. The portal of time was not a physical gateway, but a metaphorical passage that she had traversed with her whole heart, guided by the moonlight and fueled by the timeless human desire to reach beyond the veil of the present. Chapter 10, Eternal Promises. In the days following the ritual under the blue moon, Sophie found herself reflecting deeply on the themes of love and legacy that had woven through her journey in Lysandra. She had come seeking answers about her grandmother, only to uncover a rich tapestry of community history, personal sacrifice, and mystical belief. The experience at the Moonlight Temple, while not unveiling a visible portal in time, had opened her heart and mind to the deeper connections that bound her to her ancestors and their traditions. With the village's support, Sophie decided to host a small gathering at the old oak tree, intending to honor the eternal promises made by Mabel and Jonathan. She invited Clara, the villagers, and anyone else who wanted to celebrate or remember a promise of their own. On a clear, moonlit night, they gathered around the oak. Lanterns hung from its branches, casting a soft glow that mirrored the gentle light of the moon. Sophie began the evening by sharing the story of her grandparents, not just focusing on their separation, but celebrating the strength and duration of their love. Under this very tree, Mabel and Jonathan made promises to each other, Sophie told the assembled group. Promises that were kept, not in the ways they expected, but through the memories and stories that we cherish and continue to share. Tonight, we honor those promises, and all the promises that bind us to each other. Moved by her words, others stepped forward to share their stories. One elderly couple renewed their wedding vows, their hands trembling as they spoke their heartfelt words. A young man dedicated a poem to his late sister, promising to keep her memory alive in his actions. Each story, each promise, added layers to the tapestry of communal memory that Sophie had come to realize was the true heart of Lysandra. As the evening drew to a close, Sophie placed a new plaque at the base of the oak tree, inscribed with a quote from her grandmother's letter, "True love endures, not in the whispers of the wind, but in the silence of the heart." It was a tribute to all who had loved and lost, and to those who dared to love in the future. Feeling a sense of closure and fulfillment, Sophie looked up at the moon, feeling the presence of her grandmother and Jonathan in the cool night air. She knew that her time in Lysandra was drawing to a close, but the journey had changed her. She was no longer just a visitor returning to her roots, she was a keeper of stories, a weaver of histories, and a believer in the power of promises. Returning to the cottage, Sophie sat down to write the final chapter of her book. It was a reflection on everything she had learned, about love, about sacrifice, and about the eternal bonds that hold us together. She wrote about the oak tree, the moonlight temple, and the ritual of the blue moon, weaving her personal discoveries with the broader history of the village. When she finally finished, she felt a profound sense of peace. Her story, like the promises under the moonlight, would endure. It would be a beacon for others, a tale of how the past can inform and enrich the present, and how, under the watchful gaze of the Moonlight Goddess, every promise holds a touch of eternity. Sophie's journey had begun with a quest for understanding her grandmother's past, but it ended with her becoming a vital part of her village's living history. The eternal promises, once whispered beneath the boughs of an ancient oak, now echoed loudly in the hearts of all who had shared in her story. Epilogue, New Vows under the moonlight. As Sophie prepared to leave Lysandra, the village that had so warmly embraced her and breathed new life into her family's history, she felt a mixture of nostalgia and accomplishment. The book she had come to write was completed, rich with the tales of the past interwoven with the vibrant threads of the present. It was more than a historical account, it had become a testament to the enduring power of love and the protective grace of the Moonlight Goddess. On her last evening, the villagers organized a farewell gathering in the village square, under the soft glow of a waxing moon. The same square that had witnessed the midsummer festival was now filled with friends who had supported her journey, Clara, Mr. Henley, Mrs. Elcott, and many others whose stories had touched her heart and enriched her narrative. Sophie was given the floor to speak, a chance to express her gratitude and share her final thoughts. Standing before the gathered crowd, she felt the weight of the moment, the end of a significant chapter in her life and the beginning of something new. Tonight, as I stand under our beautiful moon, I am reminded of the cycles of life, the endings that lead to beginnings, and the promises that lead to fulfillment, Sophie began, her voice steady despite the emotions swirling within her. We are all part of a continuous flow of love and memory, and tonight, I want to make a new vow. she paused, looking around at the faces turned towards her, each illuminated by the gentle moonlight. "This vow is not just for me, but for all of us. It's a promise to keep our stories alive, to share them with the world, and to remember that our connections to each other transcend time and place." Sophie continued, "The Moonlight Goddess has watched over us, just as she watched over my grandmother and Jonathan. Under her light, we've shared our histories and our hearts. Let us continue to do so, nurturing the bonds that this beautiful village has forged." The villagers responded with applause and cheers, many moved by her words. They promised to uphold her vow, to keep the spirit of their stories alive for generations to come. As the celebration continued into the night, Sophie felt a profound connection to Lysandra, not just as a place of her ancestry, but as a living, breathing community that had become part of her own story. Later, as the moon climbed higher in the sky, Sophie walked to the old oak tree one last time. Under its sprawling branches, she whispered her thanks to Mabel and Jonathan, to the village, and to the Moonlight Goddess. There, she left a copy of her completed book, a gift to the village library, ensuring that the tales of love, sacrifice, and mystical evenings would continue to inspire. Walking back to her cottage, Sophie felt the chapter of her life in Lysandra closing, but she knew that new chapters were waiting to be written. With a heart full of new vows under the moonlight, she was ready to face whatever came next, carrying with her the eternal light of Lysandra's moon and the unbreakable promises made beneath its watchful gaze.